Hello, welcome to the continuation of the Spirit of Apollo. In the previous Spirit of Apollo videos, I assembled a LEGO Saturn V rocket and talked about the history of the Apollo space program. In this continuation, I'm going to be assembling a new LEGO model. It is a LEGO Lunar Module model that my son recently gave to me. And while I'm assembling it, I'll talk a little bit about the lunar module and some of the difficulties in landing on the moon. And I'll also talk a little bit about the scientific nature of the Enterprise and some of the lessons we can learn about science from the moon landings themselves. Today we're going to build bag one from the model, which is, as I understand it, the landing site for the lunar module. Now that we've assembled our landing site, let's take a look at how the landing sites for the Apollo missions were selected. Ideally, for a project that has the advancement of scientific knowledge as one of its goals, one would want to select landing sites that were of greatest scientific interest. However, in Project Apollo, human lives were at stake, so science would take a back seat to safety. Since the landings were assisted by Earth-based controllers, the most obvious restriction was that all of the landings would take place on the side of the moon visible to Earth, where radio contact was possible. For the first human landing, NASA's Apollo Site Selection Board considered a list of 30 potential sites, using data from Earth-based observation and photographs taken of 20 of the sites by the first 3 lunar orbiter missions. They were looking for a relatively smooth and flat site with minimal obstructions such as mountains or craters along the approach path. They also insisted that the site could be reached from a spacecraft in a free return trajectory. That is, if something were to happen to the spacecraft on the way to the moon, the astronauts would be in an orbit that would bring them back to the Earth without having to fire their engine. This limited the landing sites to a band within 5 degrees north or south of the lunar equator. Later Apollo missions had a little more leeway. They would depart for the moon in a highly elliptical free return orbit, and then once they completed their systems checks and docked with the lunar module, they would conduct a mid-course correction that would deviate from their free return trajectory. Docking with the lunar module first allowed the astronauts to use the lunar module's engine as a backup maneuvering engine in an emergency. This is just what happened during Apollo 13. When an explosion ripped through the service module, the crew was able to use their lunar module Odyssey's engine to enter a free return trajectory that would take them around the moon and back home to Earth. NASA's search for a suitable landing site reminds us of the role of serendipity in science. In tracking the orbits of the lunar orbiter missions, NASA discovered that the difference between the actual positions of the satellites and the positions predicted for them by the computers differed much more than was expected. NASA scientists traced the unexpected errors to small deviations in the moon's gravity that were caused by subsurface mass concentrations. Correcting for these mass cons, as they are known, allowed greater precision in landing from Apollo 12 onward. And recently, scientists studying the origin of mass cons have used them as clues to the nature of the moon's early geology. I am reminded of a quote often attributed to Isaac Asimov. The most exciting phrase in science, the one that heralds new discoveries, is not "Eureka, I have found it," but "That's funny." Until next time, Godspeed.